Hi guys, good to be back with another video, and in this video I want to talk about axes and saws, and particularly I want to share with you some of my thoughts, preferences, modifications, and just amalgamation of different little things that put together a nice axe and saw combo that I like for many types of trips. You can apply it to lots of different trips, but I think at the core of this is probably my desire to have equipment that packs well for canoe trips, because that's one of the ways that I really like to travel in the wilderness. You know, check out my Barrens video, for example, but also, you know, a bit closer to home for me, the River Tay trip that I did a few years ago. That type of thing is what I have in mind. I'm not probably going to be backpacking a long distance hike with this type of stuff in my backpack. As much as this would pack quite well in a backpack, it's more going to be in a portage pack on a canoe trip, or perhaps in a toboggan on a winter trip. This would also work there, although these do have their limitations for winter use, but certainly for a spring, summer, autumn or fall trip, where you want an axe and a saw, but for them to be portable. Yes, we can argue about bigger axes, what constitutes a boy's axe, if we want to be somewhat derogatory about it, what's a man's axe, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, we can talk about that. And I've made videos about axes before and what I like for use for winter travel versus summer travel. You can find that on my YouTube, like 10 years ago nearly. So I'm not really here to debate that. What I'm here to talk about is what I've found as a really nice combo, and the core use case is a canoe trip. I mean, of course, if we're in a fixed camp, I'm just gonna have one of those orange Barco saws. It's robust, it's cheap. I've got one in the back of my vehicle. We keep one in our camp. We have one in the instructor's camp. We have one for students to use. You know, they're really good. But when we're traveling, we need something more portable. Now, for many years, for pretty much everything, I used this. And this was made by the late, great Chris Boyton, a fantastic bowyer, very knowledgeable on bow making. But he was a good woodworker in general. And he made these saws. And you know, this has been well used. It's of a very traditional type. Some people argue that it is something specific to woodlaw, for example, because Ray Mears had Chris Boyton make these. But if you just look back in museums and old books and old black and white documentaries, and you see this type of saw all the time. And they're not difficult to make. In fact, Henry, who works with me, made a really nice little tutorial on how to make these with a few workshop tools if you're interested. But one of the issues with these is that they are susceptible to moisture. The joints swell. You know, if you get this wet, if you go in the water when you're in a canoe, or even if your boat fills with water, you know, you just swamp a bit going through a big rapid and you need to bail out. And this is down the side of a canvas portage pack. It's going to get wet and the blade will rust a little bit. Yeah, sure. But the issue then is if this joint here swells, that can be an issue. It can be an issue just generally in terms of the longevity of the wood. And this is well treated with linseed oil, but even so, it has its limitations when it comes into contact with water. I really like this for winter. Like, this is what I use for winter. It's as big as a decent sized bow saw that we might have in camp normally, 24 inches. And it's wood, which means it's not as cold in the hand as a metal saw. It also isn't, it's not tapering down to one end, so it's got good capacity for larger pieces of wood. It isn't constrained at one end. So I like it. Two people can use it together. You know, and it's not particularly heavy. And if you're interested, that's made of beech wood, but that's not super critical. But that's what that is. And so that was my kind of default for traveling on, you know, winter hot tenting trips, toboggan trips, that type of thing, as well as canoe trips. But then, as I say, I had a few times when it got a bit damp, and one time it got so swollen in here I couldn't even get the saw blade folded back in properly. So I'm like, okay, I maybe need to find an alternative to that. And along comes, and I know a lot of you will have seen these before, along comes the Boreal 21 by Agawa, which I think is a great little saw, which I've got in here. I've got no connection with this company. Just to be clear, I'm not sponsored by anyone. Yeah, I get pro deals on a few things, I get trade prices on a few things, sometimes if I ask, but you know, frankly, I'm not sponsored. I don't want to be anybody's bitch, frankly. And so I hope that's not too strong language for YouTube. But you know, I want to have my own unfettered opinions about things and to be able to give them and say things are good when I like them and tell people what I think about things when they're not for me. I really like this. I first became aware of them. One guy turned up on one of my courses with one of these, and then shortly after I started seeing them on a trip in Canada, and yeah, I really like them. I mean, they are a similar design to other saws that have come before, but they've just done a good job of making it into a nice small package. It doesn't rattle when it's closed up. There is one little flaw with it, which, to be fair, I've never mentioned to the company, but it was something that happened when I was working up in Scotland a few years ago. And I've got another one of these, and this one's quite new, because I had one of these originally, has a yellow handle, otherwise it's the same as this, and that's kind of ended up being one that I use on trips with customers, and everyone can use it, and it's got a bit battered, and I was like, I'm going to get myself another one just for me, for my personal trips. But one of the things that happened with that one is you see here, I hope you can see that, again, this thing focuses on my face. Let me just come up close to the camera so you can see. I want you to be able to see that there. There's a little spring clip here, and there's a pin that goes through, and that holds the blade in. So it acts as a hinge, but it also holds the end of the blade in. And it's really, you know, it's really convenient if you want to change the blade out, because you can get different types of blade. It isn't just about replacing a blunt blade or a broken blade. You know, you've got different types of blade for different jobs. You can just flip that off, ping that. I'm not going to do it now, but you just push that off, push the pin out, and then you've released the blade and you can put another one in. What happened with this was the guy, one of the students on one of our forest hunter courses, I had this saw there because we'd just done, well, the other one, the same model as this, but the other one with the yellow handle, we'd just done a spey trip, a river spey canoe trip, and so I had this with the group kit, or the other one with the group kit, and I brought it out on the forest hunter, which was the next course, and I was still in Scotland. We had a bow saw, a Barco bow saw, but we needed quite a lot of firewood, and so I brought this out and I was like, let's use this as well. And then one of the students was using it, and he was sawing quite low to the ground, and there were quite a lot of small spruce trees that had been brought into camp, and the students were all beavering away working at cutting these down into sections that we could either split or just pop into the stove or into the fire. You know, they need to be a certain length to go into the stove, and in working this backwards and forwards, it's come into contact at some point either with another trunk that's laid parallel to it, or maybe a side branch, and that just got pinged off. It just went bong, and he didn't even realize at the time what had happened, but he realized when he went to fold it up that the blade fell out because the pin fell out, and so to me that's the weakness of this. If you're sawing and it comes into contact with something, particularly if it's like brash on another piece of something, then you could lose the spring clip. So I do, as well as carrying a spare blade, I would recommend taking a spare spring clip and spare pins, because you could lose them. So that's the first thing I'll say. It's like, if you're going to take one of these, take those spare, particularly for a wilderness trip. Even in Scotland, you know, we were working at a remote course site. We needed to drive several kilometres on a forestry track, then we needed to either hike in or take a small ATV into the camp spot where we were working for the whole week. Getting a spare one of those out there just wasn't an option. Same on a canoe trip in Canada, or even, you know, on a remote canoe trip in Scotland or wherever you are. If you're committed to a trip, you can't just stop off at a hardware store and get one of these. So have those with you in your repair kit or, you know, with the saw. But I really like these, and I've just got a general purpose saw blade on there. So it's got the raker teeth, and then it's got the regular teeth, just in the same way as we have on the Barcos in our fixed camps. And then, you know, here I've got this aggressive one here with regular teeth, and that's good for seasoned wood, getting through seasoned wood quickly. And you can see that you can get different types of blades. So the ability to change blades is useful, and carrying the spare blades is useful. Now what I do, I found this. Now I was doing a canoe trip in Canada, and the outfitter provided me with one of these in one of these, which is a Frost River slip for a saw, and it fits perfectly. Wax canvas. Many of you will be familiar with Frost River stuff. You don't need me to talk about it too much. I did a really nice article on making a set of spatulas and spoons to go into one of their utensil rolls. They make that sort of thing really nicely. This is really nice. And then of course they make the lovely portage packs as well, which are quite heavy, particularly when they get wet, but they're very well made, and you know, a sort of luxury canvas item. But this is a little bit more utilitarian, but it's still very well made. And so I got a couple of these. I got one for my personal saw, and I got one for the group saw. And then the good thing about this, as well as it protecting the saw and protecting your gear from the saw, the other good thing about having a slip, and it's the same with the wooden one, the good thing about having the slip is, yeah, everything goes in there, but then you can also put your spare blade or whatnot in there as well. You know, that will all, can't see what I'm doing there, but you no doubt heard me do that. Slot that in there. You could pop those in there, or pop those in there. You do stand the chance of losing them, of course. Or, you know, what I will often do is staple them onto something like this. You know, staple them or tape them onto there, so that they're with that. It's harder to lose that then, or have it in a repair kit. If you want it to be like go proper double, you know, 2 is 1 and 1 is none kind of mentality, have one of those with the blade and one with your repair kit for the trip. But the problem with this, going back to water, is that this is just card, and if you get this wet, as nice as this is wax canvas, water will get in there and that will get all soggy and it will disintegrate. So I just want to share with you a couple of ideas for how you might get around that. But as I say, I really like this. And it just ties up there, around the front. And it just makes such a neat package. I like, that's something I really like with outdoor gear. When you bring two things together that weren't necessarily made specifically for each other, but they just fit really well together, and you end up with something that's just like a perfect little setup. How good is that? Yeah. So I've got my spare blade in there, I've got my saw, everything's protected from the stuff that's in there, those jagged teeth down the inside of my portage pack, etc. That's all protected, and it just looks good as well. It just looks the part. So I like that. But as I say, the weakness is the blade being in a piece of card. Right, so the first option would be just to take some duct tape and put duct tape down each side of the card so that it's sealed in duct tape, and that will go quite a long way to waterproofing it actually, because it's plasticky. You know, if you've got the whole thing sealed up, that's pretty good. The downside with that though is if you want to change blades, like just as a matter of course, you know, rather than it just being a spare one in case you break the one you've got, or it just gets you know, gets blunt and you want to change it, it's like, okay, I want the deadwood saw, or I want a bone saw, or I want a general purpose for green wood or what have you, then you've got problems, because you take that duct tape off, it won't go back on again. So here is another solution that I was showed years ago. This is a piece of hook and loop. I think that's what the generic term is. Velcro, yeah, Velcro is a trademarked item, yeah, but that hook and loop stuff, and it's just two pieces, you know, the two pieces that will fit together, and what you got in there is, and it's wide enough that it envelops your saw blade, and then you can just put it all around your saw, put one piece down, put the saw blade down, and then put the other piece on the top and cut it to length so that it is there. And so that is, and also if you had to make an improvised saw, if you've ever made any of those improvised type of saws, like the Morse-Kahansky type, the Halton H buck saw, or the steam bent saws, that if you're just carrying a blade like that, that will then form a mask for your blade as well. So it's got multiple uses, but the thing I like about it in the context of what we're talking about here is that it means you can access this as many times as you want, and you put it back. Doesn't stop it from getting wet, of course, because this is a fabric and water will get in, so the blade might get a little bit corroded if it was to get wet and stay in there, but this material is not going to degrade when it gets wet like the card is, so it maintains its ability to protect your other equipment from the saw blade, and it keeps the saw, and you, of course, you don't want to just put your hand in something and to have a naked saw blade there. That's a really good solution, a very inexpensive solution as well, so I like that a lot. And that, of course, then just, you know, slots in into your slipcase, that's the one for the wooden one, and you can do exactly the same for the Boreal 21. So that's kind of my saw. Like that is a really neat package for saw. All right, axe. This is a small forest axe, Gransfors small forest axe. And it's still my preferred axe for sort of summer, you know, late spring, summer, fall travel. Very portable. Some people would sniff at it and say it's a boy's axe. Yeah, but what are you really doing with it? I mean, this is the thing. It's always a case of specifying the tools for the job. And one of the things I'm always conscious of with travel, with wilderness travel, is having the functionality that you need versus having excess weight. So yeah, particularly in winter, take a bigger axe. Yeah, you need more firewood, particularly in the Boreal. It's denser, the grain is closer together, there's more knots, you've got fewer days of daylight, you've got more firewood to process, etc, etc. But for summer, you almost just need a hatchet around camp a lot of the time. You might need to clear a portage trail, you might need to split out a bit of firewood. There's a lot of squirrels around here today running around. But it's a really good size. There's a reason why these are popular, because they're portable, they'll fit in a portage pack, they'll fit in a day pack. You can swing them two-handed, you can use them one-handed, you can choke them up and carve with them. You can't carve with a bigger axe because there's too much of a counterbalance lever effect there with a long helve or a long handle with a larger axe. There's a reason why carving axes have got short handles, even if they've got heavier heads than this. So it's good for carving. You can just about use it two-handed. You can fell small trees with it, you can split, you can carve, you can do fine work, you can even make feather sticks with it. So it's a really good general purpose axe. One of the things I don't like about Gransfors axes, actually most axes, is the masks that they come with, what a lot of people call sheaths, but it's not really a sheath, is it? I mean, it's not a sheath shape. The mask, the cover, is often the cheapest part of what's generally quite a good quality package. And so I really like these. And again, I have no contract or sponsorship. Beneath the Stars Leathercraft, really good quality. Stiff. I like them on my axes, and I replace my Gransfors axe masks personally, this size and larger size. I replace them with these, and you know, it's just a really nicely handmade piece of leathercraft that stands up the test of time. I travel a lot, and this doesn't just have to go into my toboggan bag, or more likely my portage pack. It also gets put in a hold all, which gets put in a hold of a bag, in a hold of a plane with other bags. And with a lot of the masks that come with axes, they're very flexible, the leather, and they get bent around. And I've had the edge of the blade come through because it's been bent around so much while it's being packed. And even if you just wrap, you know, a piece of clothing around it, or you wrap a piece of bubble wrap around it or something, it doesn't always help. And it certainly doesn't help when it's in your portage pack. You want something that's stiff. And I think this is excellent quality. You know, something like this is really good. It doesn't have that long, flappy fastener around the back either. It just has this little fastener here, which won't stretch as easily, and it just holds it on nicely. That won't, you can hammer there if you want, but I still prefer to take that off because you don't damage the inside of that. But even so, I don't like that long strap. I don't like the flexibility of the standard masks. That is something that I add onto my axes as standard. Then other modifications. This handle has been refinished. Yeah? It's been scraped right back to the raw wood, and then it has been refinished in a way that is similar to how you might do a furniture finish or a gun stock finish, built up in layers and layers. I have got a PDF, it's almost like a little, it's an article, like a PDF article, that you can download on how to do that step by step. The link for that will be below this video, directly below, so have a look there. Also, while I remember to talk to you about links, in case I forget to mention it at the end, have a look at wildernessaxeskills.com. That's got all the details of my Wilderness Axe Skills and Campcraft book, so check that out as well. While I'm there, and there may well be some nice extra resources there for you as well. But certainly check out the Refinishing Your Axe Handle PDF article that you can get for free. Just go and get that, and I'll send you the details. But back to this. So that's been refinished, and that protects the wood much more. I've also chosen this axe specifically to have really good grain alignment along the handle, you know, so I picked this out. My book will have more on how to choose an axe. You want good alignment between the head and the handle, and you want good grain alignment there, ideally. With hickory it doesn't matter so much, but ideally you do. Then the other thing that I've done on this, particularly because it's going to go in with other kit, it sometimes goes into a portage pack, which is effectively a dry bag. I've taken a metal file and I've just rounded the pole off somewhat here, so there isn't so much of a sharp corner on each corner of the pole there. It doesn't stop the functionality of that. It's not as rounded as the hunter's axe as it's known, the one that they make with a rounded pole that's used supposedly for skinning, but it just means it's less likely to damage the inside of dry bags. It's less likely to damage other equipment, so I've filed that off with a metal file. And then, as a matter of course, I regularly refinish, or at least update the coat on this, particularly if it's been used a lot. I've got a nice little article from years ago, how to care for your axe. There's like 3 things to do that you should do regularly to care for your axe. 1 thing for the handle, 1 thing for the head, 1 thing for the mask. I'll link to that below as well. That's just an article on my blog. Look after the mask like you would your boots. And then oil on the helve, particularly before a trip. Now I like an oil that sets in a way, like a gun oil that doesn't stay really greasy. So a really light oil that protects from atmospheric moisture. That's what I tend to put on my axe if I can get hold of it. Ballistol also works really well on these axes, because they will get rusty very quickly if they're, you know, if you've sharpened this in particular, so there's raw metal, and then this is at all damp, this will corrode very easily on here. So you want a nice layer of oil on there, not too thick, but just to protect it. So those are the things that I do, particularly before a trip. Nice coat of another coat of linseed on, wipe it off, wipe the excess off, let it dry. As I say, it's been refinished, so it's well protected to start off with. But I top up that, sharpen the axe before a trip, take some sharpening kit with me, of course, but make sure it's sharp before I set off. But then I oil it straight away, make sure the mask is well protected with some leather protector, and then that's good to go. So that's sort of set up just how I like it before I go on a trip, and then I just maintain it as I go. I might take a little drop, a bottle of oil with me if I'm going on a longer trip, and particularly if it's a canoe trip, because I don't want this to get wet and corrode. And then I've got my saw set up as you've said, and that, as I've said, as you've seen, and that is a little package. They don't fit together in any great way, but that will slip down the side of a portage pack, as will that, and that will go in very tidily, and everything's nicely protected and easily got hold of without damaging me as well. So yeah, that's it. So that's the kind of conclusion I've come to. There's nothing massively earth-shattering there in terms of, you've probably seen people talk about these axes on YouTube channels before. You've probably seen people talk about these saws on YouTube channels and blogs and social media and whatnot before. But just to give you some idea of how I've got my stuff set up and how I've combined things, and a couple of little tips and tricks that I find particularly useful, particularly with storing spare blades, taking the pins with you. This combo of this Agawa Canyon and this slip case is fantastic. Get a decent mask for your Grand Fours or your Halter Fours or what have you, and then set the axe up just how you want it. If you've got the time, refinish the handle, look after the head, put a good mask on it. I'm repeating myself. I'll finish there. Remember to check out wildernessaxeskills.com, and remember to get that PDF download so you can do your own refinished axe handle. That's much, much, much better than the factory finish, I have to say. These are great as a starting point. Good handle, good head. Same with Halter Fours. Good handle, good head. Yeah, but you can improve the finish on the handle. The factory finish these days is not as good on any of them as it used to be 10, 20 years ago, I don't think. I think they're just making so many of them, and you can get a much better mask than they come with. And then if you want to set up other elements of it, go for it. And then you've got the perfect axe for its size. You've kind of pimped it a little bit, and the same with your saw. That's me, out. Speak to you soon. Cheers.